All right. So in section 2.1, we are going to be looking at proportions, which are values that we calculate whenever we're investigating categorical variables. Now, remember, categorical variables are when you collect data that is based on groups. Now, the first type of graph that we're going to be looking at is one that's known as a frequency table. Now, a frequency table is the idea that when you've done a survey or collected data from individuals, that you can organize it based on either two or more groups. Specifically with a frequency table, that is when you're just simply what you're doing is you're organizing how many you counted from the first group, the second group. This here was a study about US adults and what type of phone that they owned. So that some were Android, iPhone, Blackberry, non-smartphone, or, this was 2012, so a bit dated, but no cell phone. The total number of people who were in the study was 2,253. Now, what we're going to be more interested in is a table that has the proportions or has the decimals. This version is known as a relative frequency table. And the idea behind that is that it breaks it down into, think of it like 100% of the data, but it breaks it into like slices or almost think of like a pie chart where you can now see, Android had about 20.3%, iPhone had about 19.4%. Now, these are just purely the decimal versions of them all, but it also is another way of looking at, how much or which group had like the highest proportion or the largest slice of the pie. Another thing we'll be doing starting with this section is starting to calculate proportions. There's a little structure of it, number in the category that you're focused on out of the total sample size. In this class, know that it's always going to be smaller number on top, larger number at the denominator. And one of our first examples is here that suppose we wanted to calculate the proportion of those in the study who did not own a cell phone. Now, keep in mind, there's three different ways that you can write a proportion. There's fraction, there's decimal, and then there's the percent. Looking at the frequency table, if we wanted the proportion that had no cell phone, well, that would be 293 out of the 2,253. So we can take that and write it right down here. The 293 out of 2,253. And there we go. We've got a fraction version. But sometimes it's nicer to see it as a decimal. So go ahead and take your calculator and divide that fraction. Again, 293 divided by 2,253. And you should see on your calculator what shows up to be something like this 0.13. And just know that the primary version of proportions that we're going to be using are the fraction version and the decimal version. Percentages, it's up to you if you want to write them as the percent value, but if you did, remember the usual is like move your decimal two places to the right or multiply by 100%. But there you go. All three versions of the those who did not have a cell phone. Now let's get into more of like what you're going to be anticipating seeing once you start working on the homework. There is something really small to mention now. It won't be a huge thing for our test one, but as we get into later parts of the semester, it is the notation. When you have calculated a proportion, like this many out of this many, but it was only based on a sample, the notation that you use is P with a little hat. And that right there is known as an accent. But the reason why you use the hat sometimes and sometimes you don't is whenever you calculate a proportion that's based off of a population. So again, this is going to be proportion from a sample proportion from a population, that if you did do a survey, but you were able to ask every single person in that population, then you would use just the regular P. If you only maybe there was like 50,000 students, but you only maybe did a sample of like 25 of them, then you would use the P hat. Now, if anyone in homework decides that they're going to be typing their their homework and maybe they are not sure where that little hat symbol is, you can always just spell it out, just P hat. Now let's try using that immediately. Looking at these next two situations here, you've got one study that was based off of the US Census, and then you got one that was just a survey off of a smaller amount of students. So the whole idea here is that one of these is based on the population, and one of them is just a sample. So this right here, more specifically, is the one that's a based off of a population, which is the U.S. Census. It's supposed to be like everybody. So if we calculate the proportion for this study, it would be the P without the hat, population proportion. In terms of the numbers, you take your 37, 342, 870. That's how many out of 301,000,000 152,177 that were foreign born. Now, go to take just a quick moment to go and crunch that to see what decimal you get. It should be 0.124. All right, now the one that's just a sample, it was just a survey of a smaller amount of students. Then for this one, you would use p hat. Now, on your homework, if it asks for the notation, include it, P or P hat. If it doesn't ask for it, you just need to focus on either the fraction or the decimal. Some of the homework exercises will ask for both fraction and decimal, and some will ask for just the decimal. So just make sure that you take a moment whenever you're doing homework to just carefully make sure that you're following the instructions. But now this one, careful. They want to do how many students smoke, right? What proportion of students smoke based on those that were included in the survey? So what you're going to need is you're going to need the total number of students, and then you're going to need how many smoke on top. But careful, what would the total be? Again, just read this carefully. Like, what would the total, the denominator be down at the bottom if the total number of students? All right. So note that we've got 43 who smoke and we've got 319 who don't. So you're going to need to add these up and go and just take a moment to do that. 43 plus the 319, that's going to give us 362 total students. But of that total, there was 43 who smoked. And then you would do your division and you would get 0.119. Now, if the instructions say round to three, round to three. But if there was anyone who maybe missed that and rounded to maybe two decimal places, like 0.12, I'll take it. Okay. It's just, you know, it's fine. As long as you round to two or three, but you round accurately, you're not going to lose any points for that. Just don't round to one decimal place. Like, don't round this to like 0.10. That's losing just too much accuracy. And also make sure you round. Sometimes I have students who write, five or six numbers here to avoid rounding, but be sure that you're okay with your rounding. And keep in mind there's also an answer key for your chapter 1 homework. So whenever you're doing your 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, before you submit your homework, that answer key is there to be able to give you feedback on whether your responses are correct or if you need to adjust correct before you upload. That way you don't lose any points. Now, here's that frequency table. An example of the frequency table where they just all it is giving us how many they counted in each of the groups. The study was about how often people talk about sports. You can see those some, 302 who it's a lot that they talk about sports. And then you got down at the bottom some who's like it's more rare, or maybe they never talk about sports. Out of 2,000 people who were surveyed. Now, what we're going to do with this again, it says include the fraction, include the decimal. So we're going to have both of those things. But starting off with those who rarely or never talk about sports. And again, I'll always try to stop and pause for just a moment, at least just a little bit. And of course, if you can always pause the video if you need a little bit more time. But just take a look at there and what fraction, what numerator, denominator would you need if you're doing those who are on the lower side of rarely never talking about sports. And here it comes. It would be those the 893. It's gonna be 895 out of 2000. 895 out of 2000, and then you'd go ahead and do the division for that. Again, I'm gonna just put that in my calculator, make sure that I have it all nice and good. 895 divided by, yeah, you get 0.4475. And if this time we're only rounded to two, that'd be 0.45. Let's try another one. What proportion of those uh, talk about sports once a week or more? Now it's still going to be out of the 2000. And notice that this exercise is not asking us to do the notation, so we'll skip that for now. But go up to the table, right, the frequency table, and look at how many talk about sports once a week, but then also more than that. So this one is going to lead you to do a little bit of addition because you're combining two groups. And I'll just put a little plus sign here. Whenever you see or for our class, we're going to be adding some stuff together. All right, but here it is. Right there, 302 and 277. So you're going to go and add those together. Again, the reason why I've selected these particular examples is because you're going to see very similar examples on the homework. So anytime you get stuck on the homework, you're like, oh, I'm kind of, I think I know what I'm doing, but I want to just double check. Go back to the lecture notes, and there's going to be examples here that are going to help you out. All right, and again, just make sure that as you're going through these, that you're taking a moment to double check your rounding to make sure it's accurate. All right, now this isn't a college algebra class, so there's really no work for you to have to show me, um, especially on this assignment here where it's just, fraction decimal. I mean, you might consider at least, getting to the habit of doing fraction and decimal because sometimes it asks for it, but then on the tests and the quizzes, it does ask for it. So I will just get in the habit of doing fraction and decimal all the time. This here's a two-way table. And so what's different about this one is you've got two categorical variables. And what I mean by that is that right here, you've got one variable that's categorical where it's either yes, there was errors, or no, there was no errors, depending on the type of way that doctors were writing or creating the prescriptions. Some of them were doing it in categorical, some were using an electronic device in order to create the prescription, and some were just writing it. And so the idea here is that if physicians are maybe relying more on a device rather than written, will they maybe make less errors? But let's take a look. You can keep in mind this was out of 7,696. And the very first one says of all of the prescriptions that were um, included in this data set, how many of them had errors? And so again, this is usually pretty straightforward. This is all of them, and then that had errors was the 1732. So for these, you're just using the table, right? You just use all the numbers are there already organized. Again, if it's just a matter of, this one says only really all it wants on this one is just the decimal answer rounded to three places, but 1732 divided by 7696, that's going to give us 0.225. But definitely on your side, as you're watching this video, make sure that you take the time to also just check on your calculator, especially if you just maybe recently bought a calculator, that it is that you're getting comfortable with it and that you're as comfortable as can be whenever you get to the test. The other thing is sometimes, sometimes it's not just saying out of all of them, it may be focusing on a particular group. And what I mean by that is what they might say like the word of. That's kind of the best, that's the trigger word, like of this group or of this group. And so this total here sometimes is not the big total. It's a total for just a column. It's like a column total, or it might be a row total. And so let's take a look at some of these examples where that's the situation. Notice here that we've got what proportion of electronic had errors. And again, that's a little notation that they use, the little p hat because it's from a sample. But what do we mean by of electronic? What that one is suggesting that we do is we only focus on those that were electronic. Because you can almost, just for the moment, like pretend nothing else exists. Of the row of electronic, which there was 3,848 of them, how many had errors? 254. And that's going to be our fraction, the 254 out of the 3848. So 254 out of the 3848. And again, you can crunch the numbers and you'll get 0.066. Now, again, for your homework, it's often just going to be the fraction and the decimal version. If there is anyone who maybe feels more, maybe it's a habit you have, is like, oh, you like writing things in percentages. As long as you do it correctly, move your decimal two places to the right so that it now becomes 6.6, and then you put your percent. Now, again, what they were doing in this study was trying to compare electronic stuff versus written, who was better, worse. This next one here says of written, and take a look up there. That means all we're doing is moving down to the next row, which also had 3,848. So now it's just looking at this row and imagining nothing else exists. Of written, how many had errors? You can see the number there. It was 1478 out of the 3848. Now, I want you to go and crunch that number. Again, always smaller number on top, bigger number at the bottom. 1478 divided by 3848. And you should see that it's a much higher proportion, right? Over here, it was about 6.6% what errors whenever it was written. And now when you look at, excuse me, when that was errors, but now when you look at when it's written, that you got 0.384. So like 38.4% had errors whenever they were written. So much worse, right? Almost six times worse. Now, another thing that's going to happen is they're going to ask you, hey, find the difference. Like, what was the difference between these two numbers that we just saw? Uh, and so you'll take the 0.384 and then you'll subtract, and they'll give you guidance like they're doing right here. They're saying take the written the number of errors for the written minus the proportion for the electronic. Now, it's also taking the bigger number minus the smaller number, and when you do this, it's meant to show you how much more of a proportion had errors whenever they were written. So about 31.8% higher in terms of errors whenever they were written. Now, before we move on to something else, I wanted to also just, is it always going to be a row? No, sometimes it's going to be maybe vertically, like a column of the prescriptions with errors. Now, before I scroll up there, I want you to just look up at the table and notice that if you're focusing on just those that were of errors, a prescription that had errors, that should just be looking at a certain column of errors. So right now, for this last one, you're not even worried about the rest of the stuff. You say, okay, here's all the ones that had errors, and then it specifically is looking for how many of those were written, and it's those, right? 1,478 out of the 1732 with errors, were written. So you can just keep in mind, sometimes you got your 1732. Just going to double check that real quick. 1732, 1478. So about when there was errors, of all the ones that had errors, about 85.3% of them were written. So again, written is not as reliable these days since we've got all this technology to help support us. But all right, but there's your two-way table. That's using rows, columns, sometimes to focus in on a particular group. But yeah, sometimes they are still going to use the out of all of them, but follow that word of. The word of is the one that's sort of like your trigger word for what's going to be your denominator total. Not much left with this lecture. It's mainly just to do our first quick look at stat key, and also just an example where what they want us to do here is draw a two-way table, and and then do one with stat key, where stat key creates it for us. But there'll be one in the homework where they want you to draw it out, and the reason why we're going to need more columns than what we might think we need is because they want an extra column and row for the totals. And actually, here, let's do this. For this one, we're gonna need 6 rows. Is that right? Yes, 6 rows. So just split it like long ways, and then do 3 rows on top, and then do 3 rows on the bottom. So you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then you're also gonna go ahead and split it in 4 columns. And here's why. In this study, it was about different occupations and whether these individuals were left handed or right handed. And then we're going to be doing I think it's 4 different occupations. That was psychiatrist, that was architects who were in this study that were sampled, and then those also orthopedic surgeons and those lawyers. So 4 different occupations. Again, this is your categorical, and this is your other categorical variable. Now we also could have done this where the left hand, right hand stuff was over here, and the jobs were over here. But either way, it's just a matter of you could just swap them around if you wanted to. But we're going to go it this way. And the first piece of information is here. I'll go ahead and circle it. It's that of psychiatrists, that was 10 out of 118 who were left-handed. So 10 out of 118 total that were left-handed. And so all you need to do now is fill in your right-handed people, which is just do the subtraction or even mental math. That would leave us with 108. And then you move on to the next occupation, which is the architects. You can see them up there that it was 26 out of 148. And then you would just do the subtraction, 148 divided by 26 to get the right-handers and just keep going. You'd have orthopedic surgeons, those 5 out of 132, and for lawyers, 16 out of 105. And then I'll let you go ahead and take a few moments. I'm gonna pause the video if you need to, and do all the subtractions to fill in your right-handers. So like 148 minus 26, and just keep going. But then what you'd also do, again, always, since the advantage you have is to be able to pause me if there's things that you want to be able to try more independently. But you would do your subtractions, you'd get all your righties, and then you would also total up your columns to get your bottom numbers. Again, but this is an exercise where it's us doing the drawing ourselves. But then there's also going to be an example where you have StatKey create these tables for you, and that's what we're going to try here. And before we even do it, just want to let you know that when you get to the homework and you see a StatKey example, you must go to StatKey, do whatever it is that you need to do, create the graph, the table, the picture, and then make sure you upload that with your homework so that you don't lose points for not showing evidence that you use StatKey to do the homework. So this next one here, actually two more. One of them, first of all, wants us to make a just one categorical base graph. There's a study that they did related to the scenario was about restaurants, is what was happening, and in this particular one that we're going to look at is there was one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, 8 different servers working at a restaurant, and some of them they were all helping customers, and what they wanted to do is see who had the highest proportion or the highest percentage in terms of how many people that they served. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go here, and the homework will be the same. It'll show you where to go, which is going to be the descriptive statistics and graphs, but more specifically, there's going to be one about just one categorical variable, and there's the name of the data set. It's the information's already been preloaded into StatKey, and you'll see it lightning fast. It can make the table for you. And so let me go ahead and go there with you. Restaurant, 4th edition, server. And so I'm going to go over to Safari. And again, you can use whatever internet browser that you usually use, Chrome, Firefox, Safari. And what you'll do is you'll just type in StatKey. Right, StatKey, hit go or enter. It's going to be the first thing that shows up, StatKey lock 5, and just go to the home page. And these are the first 5 graphs that we're going to be using to start off this semester to make different types of tables and graphs and distributions. And you can see it right there, one categorical. And when you're ready, go ahead and jump into there. It's already, all the data, the numbers are already preloaded into here. All we need to do for these homeworks is to pick the data set that we want from this little list. So you can just open and close this little list. And the good news is that they're in an alphabetical order. And so the one we're looking for, again, is the restaurant 4th edition server, right? Don't do 3rd edition. That is going away as the old edition. Restaurant 4th edition server. And just go ahead and click on that. Boop. And there you can see all 8 of the different servers, and who served more. Um, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, But then this is even better. It gives you the count. And so you're just looking for the I mean, you'll see in a moment that the actual question on the lecture handout is like who had the most, right? So you can see 54 for E, but you can also see the relative um, 0.18, the little relative like proportion decimal there. So if the question is who had the most, you would go with E. E had a proportion of 18, 0.8, 0.18. Yeah. And that's it. I think that's all it's going to want you to do. But what you would do with this is even with just your phone, just take a picture with this of this and upload it with the rest of the work that you do for this assignment. So there's still going to be the stuff where you're writing work out for like problem one, two, and so on. But for this one, you'll answer the question, and or if you're more like computer savvy, again, there's the snippet tool where you can take a picture of your screen, or there is like short commands like control, blah 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 blah, right? Whatever PC, Windows, whatever you got, Mac computer, just do a screenshot and make sure you upload this to get the points for this. But yeah, E is the one who had the most. Just double checking that. Yeah, 54.18. And that's it. I mean, if we wanted to go and also put what they had, 18%. But let's try another one and we'll call it a lesson. Example 6, the restaurant tips also did another comparison, which was, comparing the days of the week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and whether um, it was dinner or lunch. Like throughout that day, how many lunch people, how many times people came for lunch, and how many times people came for dinner. Now this is the name of the data set. Restaurant again, fourth edition, day by time, but it's going to be the two categorical variables. And so let's go ahead and let's try this one again. Very quick, right? It's very quick exercises. You can click on where it says stat key. Just go back to the home page and now switch to the one that says two categorical variables. Boop. Again, it's going to immediately default to whatever's at the top of the list. And so you got to click on this to bring the drop down and then scroll down. It's right there pretty quick. Restaurant, fourth edition, day by time. Go ahead and click on that one. And boom, it made the two-way table super fast. Now, you can click on where it says switch variable and see that's what I mean. Like you can either have like the days along the side and lunch dinner at the top, or I'm gonna switch it back and do the days at the top. So either way, but I'm gonna leave it this way because if we want to compare column wise as our days, and then look where it says right here column, that will let you see individually like what happened for Monday, what happened for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And so if you look at particularly Friday, the 0.234 is how many times they had uh, lunch, somebody come by for lunch, and how many of their throughout the day were dinner. And for some reason, they didn't have as much lunch customers or visitors. They seem to be more like in the dinner time. The counts are up there, 15 versus 49. But in terms of proportions, about 23% came for lunch, and the rest of the business that day was for dinner. So, and that's all we would say, right? And I think that's all this one wants. But again, you would take a screenshot of this, or even just a picture with your phone, and to just show for your evidence, like, yes, I went to Stack Key and I did it, and I made the graph, and here it is. But let me hop over to the lecture and see if they wanted what answer they want us to give. Um, which day had the highest dinner proportion? That would be Friday. And if it doesn't ask you to give the proportion, you don't have to. But if it does, go ahead and do it. And let's just suppose it did ask, like, hey, what was the proportion for dinner? For Friday, it was 0.766. And that's it. That's all I've got for 2.4. That's all that you'll really need is to get you through that homework. But I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen and stop the recording. And then, of course, if questions come up, feel free to reach out. All right, take care.